Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. And we're now going to do a quick season review of Black Lightning and its third season, which I felt was the best season overall of the show so far. We picked up the events where at the end of the season 2, the Jefferson family, they get more involved with the American Security Agency, I think that's the name, ASA, and they're told of this impending invasion coming from the Markovian government because the metas, people with special abilities, are kind of running amok, and the Markovians want to kind of take them in and use them for their own purposes. So the ASA are trying to fend off that kind of invasion, and that's we know the ASA have certain rogue and dark elements of their own, using metas for their own individual purposes and missions. And we had that cliffhanger at the end of season 2, didn't we, where we had Ordell sitting with the Jefferson Pierce family, who were all happy after they kind of defeated Tobias, and then they have find out at the end they're kind of trapped or and under orders, right, with Ordell and this ASA agency, right? So that's where we picked up from season 2, if you like. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the spoilers and what was good about the season and what wasn't so good about it. So if you haven't watched the Black Lightning show so far, or if you're not caught completely up to date, you probably want to stop watching right now, get caught up, get completely up to date, and then come back later on in the show and watch this review, and then we can talk about the details as well. So what worked really well was really this whole story arc of the ASA and the Markovians, right? Because it added a lot of different depths and layers to the structure of the show. It had a much more of a serialized feel towards it, and it changed a lot in its tone and direction. Black Lightning, if you look at really the first 2 seasons, it was very much more about the race and the police brutality, the police crime, what was going on Freeland, and it kind of became a bit preachy. You know, don't get me wrong, like racial issues and social issues are always important, they're always going to be relevant. But I think when you've watched so many of these shows and so many of these films, you know, covering that subject matter, it kind of covered a bit too much familiar territory. And Black Lightning was guilty of this, and also Marvel, Netflix, as Luke Cage was doing this. You know, they just kept throwing this subject matter right in your face. It's like, okay, we get it now. You know, Black Lives Matter, we understand, but it just kept throwing that in your face too much. Season 3 really came out of that kind of tone of storytelling and focused a lot more on these people as superheroes, right? As superhero beings, focusing much more on how they deal with their powers and their capabilities and how they in charge really of certain groups and certain kind of teams, right? So that was a much more, if you like, exciting and fresh direction, and it really took these characters in different places. If you look at the start of the season, we see a lot of these people, they're actually kind of under, if you like, house arrest or incarceration, right? If we look at the Jefferson family at the beginning, we see Jefferson with this kind of weird afro, and her and Lynn, they're in this kind of really kind of sort of blue lighted area together under the duress of the ASA. Even someone like Tobias, who changed locks, if you remember in the previous seasons, he was kind of the typical criminal kingpin, and now we see him, you know, he's a person who's tested a lot, and they want to delve into his powers and what he knows about the briefcase. So we see a different side or a different dynamic played with Tobias. He's much more, if you like, the victim, the much more of the persecuted type, right? We see Lynn, who we discover later on has an addiction to green light, and that's a very good direction to take over for Lynn, because normally she's been kind of the bedrock of the family. She's been the more assured and asserted character, but we see her become more vulnerable and more frail to this addiction with green light, and then she's coming across different serums and she's becoming a lot more into superpowers. I actually feel Lynn will get some sort of superpowers in season 4, but we'll see how that plays out as well. We have Jen, of course, who we see continuing her adjustments to her own powers. Really, she is potentially or will go on to be the most powerful member of the kind of Team Lightning team, and again she's getting to grips and her powers, and we see her exhibit more of her abilities. We see her flying a lot, and you know, she's kind of got this phoenix kind of poses in the sky, and you know, she's becoming a lot more potent with her abilities, right? And again, that's a very good dynamic to work out with Jen. She develops characters' relationships with Brandon, who's a new character who, of course, is angry at Dr. Jace because Dr. Jace was responsible for killing his parents. So we have a great interesting dynamic there. We have Anissa, who struggles a lot to help out with, if you like, the metahumans who were under attack and being victimized. She has a real kind of ongoing tensions with them and trying to look after them. Anissa goes off rogue a lot of the time and she gets poisoned, I think, in one story arc here, loses her abilities. Again, she has constant tensions with Grace, constant tensions with Jen and Jefferson as well. And she's a very headstrong, kind of stubborn character, always going off on her own, doing her own things on there as well, right? So again, we see Khalil coming back and he has his own mental struggles with the painkiller identity and his own identity. There's a story about how they managed to unlock his consciousness and retain the Khalil character back. And this back and forth, we get loads of scenes where he's kind of had this mental battle on here. We have Gamby, who develops his friendship with TC, another new character who is able to, if you like, infiltrate the kind of technological systems and really feed into them as well. So Gamby builds a bond between him. We have other rogue elements within the ASA, such as Major Grey and Commander Williams as well, and also Sergeant Grail, who works beginning with the ASA, but then later on has a change of heart and becomes together and works with the heroes overall, right? So you have Moisine, the character in charge of Markovians. He comes back. Dr. Jace, as I mentioned before, is still in there. Henderson has his role where he begins the kind of resistance against the kind of occupation, and we have Jeff and others joining them as well, and Anissa as well under the identity of Blackbird, joining them and coming against them as such. Lots of different conflicting tensions on there. We have as well, most notably, a really good strong villain in Gravedigger, and that he comes into play later on in the season. I think it's the last 4 or 5 episodes he really comes into play, and he's a really great villain. They've done a really good job of really developing, and we see his origins, how he's kind of this original meta. He's the first one and he's been around for 100 years, and we see him how he was sort of in the army and he came across kind of racial diversity there, and he was very distressed about his powers and his abilities, and we discover what his main purpose is and his motivations are. He was a really fantastic performance, really well done acting ability by the actor that plays that role. So as I've just covered, you have all these multiple characters all going in these different directions, really great motivations, all have these different story arcs and purposes behind them, and Black Lightning did a great job of taking time with these characters and just letting us see them progress on this different journey and take on all these different challenges and have to make all these difficult choices. And nobody was overly right. I think the only character I think really made the decisions all the time was Gamby, you know, one of my favourite characters. And he himself has another arc when he finally discovers that Lady Eve put the hit out on him, if you remember, in season 2. You know, that was one of the threads they left dangling, but they resolved that. And we see Gamby have a bit more of a ruthless streak about him as he's trying to find this out, but he's still really the more assured of all these characters. But a lot of these characters, they make decisions and mistakes here and there. Sometimes Jefferson is right, sometimes Lynn is right, sometimes Jen is right, sometimes Anissa is right, sometimes they're wrong. And that was great, you know, but you're still rooting for them. They never did a scenario where one of these characters goes dark or goes completely evil. You know, again, this whole idea of occupation from the ASA and then your Markovian. So you're fighting kind of two main antagonists at once, and it puts the characters under a lot of stress and they have to make certain difficult choices throughout. So I thought that was great. It was all great. All the performances from all the actors playing the cast were fantastic, and I think they might have enjoyed season 3 the most because, like I said, it takes the tone in a different direction, which is all fantastic. Another great aspect was the fight choreography and the effects. I don't know if more budget was put into season 3, but it certainly seems that way. You know, a lot of the episodes, fantastic fight scenes and choreography. I notably noted in an episode standout the fights between Khalil and Gravedigger in particular. That was a great kind of corridor scene, you know, fighting throughout. You know, Anissa has always been in great fight scenes, particularly more as Blackbird, but I think she uses her powers less and she focuses more on her fighting skills. She's always been fantastic in great fight scenes. Jefferson has been involved in great fights along with Gravedigger amongst others. Always great, and the effects as well. They really ramped it up, and we really saw the capabilities of these characters. Jeff Lott with these great lightning shots. I noted before in my season finale review, there was a great battle at the end episode between Gravedigger, Brandon, and Jen, and we see them using their electrical abilities, and Gravedigger's got this eye vision. It's all great. It's all fantastic. So they really heft up the budget or the visual effects of this season. It became a lot more dynamic and exciting to watch, and visually pleasing on the eyes as well. So that was all great. That was all, fantastic throughout on there. And I think another great aspect, and this goes again how well the show was well written, was that we all know about the crisis. I assume you know about the crisis. Just a quick overview, if you like. The CW shows, as we know, have these annual crossovers, these big, massive, expansive storylines where the world is at threat or the universe is at threat. And Black Lightning was kind of kept to one side previously, away from these crossovers, because, as you know, if you didn't know, most of these shows are filmed in Vancouver, Canada, and Black Lightning is filmed in Atlanta, so it's very difficult for the cast of actors in Black Lightning to fly all over the way to Vancouver to film these scenes. But they eventually had it where Cress Williams, who plays Black Lightning, he went over to Vancouver to film the massive Crisis on Infinite Earth story arc, and Jefferson was involved in that. I'll try not to spoil it too much just in case you haven't seen it. But when Jefferson came back from that crossover, and basically what happened was everybody was integrated. Spoiler alert! Everybody was integrated into one Earth. I supported that decision. So basically Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, all the Arrow characters, and now Black Lightning could all coexist together on one place, right? Everybody had to revert back to their normal storylines, and Black Lightning handled it the best, where it referred to the event. I think it was literally one or two scenes, and Jefferson explained to, I think it was Jen and Gamby, he said, look, I went on this alternate reality and I was involved in this crisis, and nobody else really got it. And then that was it. They just left it, and they were able to continue on their storyline. They didn't have to refer back to the Crisis storyline again. They could just continue with their own story arcs, right? And that was great, because one question I did think was, having a Crisis midway through all of the show's story arcs, how are they going to pick up where they left off with their own individual stories, right? And I was really concerned about Black Lightning, because with this ASA and Markovia, we were really getting into the meats and bones of this storyline. It was really great. We had a great episode, I think, before, where Jen come under some kind of coma, and she was having all these alternate realities and alternate storylines, going to these multiple Earths, wasn't it? That was it. And she was seeing herself, right, if she took a certain direction here, what would happen? If she worked with the ASA, what would happen here? If she went on a much more vengeful direction, what would happen to her family and her friends and relationships and such? And that was a great kind of lead in, if you like, to the Crisis storyline when they had the red skies in the end, and they came back and they were just able to just pick up and just carry on, right? They didn't have to refer to it again, whereas I think the other CW shows really struggled. I'm looking at particularly Supergirl as well. I think that really struggled to kind of integrate this Crisis storyline. I've spoken about that previous episodes about Supergirl as well. So Black Lightning did, I think, the best job, where it just referred to the Crisis once, picked up straight away, and just carried on and went about its business. And you never referred to it again. It never seemed confusing. It was almost, they did it so well where you didn't need to watch the Crisis. Let's say you just watched Black Lightning, you weren't really invested in the other CW shows. You could just watch it up to the episode where you see the red skies at the end. Jeff comes back, refers to it a bit. You might think, what's going on? Really? But then you kind of roll with it and just think, okay, I'm too much invested in this occupation storyline. That's just a throwaway moment, so let it be and carry on with, right? So again, that it just handled it better, and that was a really credit to the writing, and they had a great measured feel this season. The pacing of it and the kind of plot and the way it unfolded. As I said before, it just went at such a pace where there wasn't a lot of action, particularly later on, but a lot of the times there wasn't as much fighting or explosives, but it just allowed these characters to settle into their stories, and we could just develop with them as the stories went on. It was just great writing, just great throughout, and the tone was completely serious. Black Lightning's never been one to really focus too much on the humour or the upbeat measures every such, because it's been so heavy like on the racial issues and the social issues and the kind of community infrastructure, the criminal underground and then the government kind of rogue elements before. So there's not really been that much scope for humour. I personally like that. It's never been a dark show or overly intense show, but it's always been more serious. And I think this Occupation storyline really aided to that. So yeah, that was mainly all the great points and all the good points throughout. So I'm just going to talk quickly now about it's minor issues really. I mean, one issue I think a lot has just been the soundtrack and the fact that when you have these great fight sequences or a car chase sequence or basically a superhero fight, right? You always want to have the music much more of a cinematic feel to really ramp up the tension and really ramp up the suspense. And something that Black Lightning does a lot, and it's a bit frustrating thing for me personally, that it's too much of a soundtrack driven initiative. So basically someone's fighting, right? And you think, right, we're going to get this really tense voice sequence, and we get this music, right? And then we get this hip hop, right? Hip hop, and then this soul, and then this jazz, and it's really kind of neo soul music, and it's a bit like when you have the slow motion as well and the multiple angles. It's more like you're watching a music video rather than an actual, if you like, fight sequence, right? And for me, it just takes the edge off. It takes the kind of tension away, the suspense. Just cut a bit down on the slow motion and just give us a much more dramatic music, right, where we can really get invested more in the fight. And it did this, a few times throughout the episode. Again, the fight sequence were really well staged, but just took a bit of the tension away from me. And really, another thing that really annoyed me, and I think it's a bit more the whole season, is that we have characters killed off, coming back again, killed off, coming back again. We had this a lot with Lala, of course, but he had that ability where he could sort of reformulate himself. We had Lady Eve coming back. I'm trying to think now, how did Lady Eve come back? I kind of lost on that, but yeah, she came back again. And of course Khalil, he's one of those multiple characters, dies, comes back again, dies, come back again. And if you have these characters and if you feel they're really popular with the fans and you really like these characters, then don't kill them off. Just don't kill them off. Just keep them around. Okay, if you want to have them injured and have them recover at some point, great. But don't kill them off and then come back again, kill them off, come back again. It just comes a bit repetitive. And again, takes away the stakes, because you think if you remember some of the things that's happened to Khalil, you had that really horrific scene in season 2 when Tobias pulled his spine out, but he's able to come back. So we have certain characters such as Lady Heave, who we assume is dead in season 2, but she'll probably come back in some capacity. Is Commander Williams dead? He'll probably come back in some capacity. Grace, as we know, has been put in a coma when she's put under the mind control of Gravedigger to fight Anissa. Is she going to come back? So it takes away the stakes if you keep reviving these characters. There are some characters such as Lala and Lady Eve in particular where, again, nothing wrong with the performances, but they didn't feel to me as critical this season as other characters did. Khalil as well. There's a point where Khalil could have left when he kind of gets control or suppresses the painkiller persona, and we have that scene in one of the episodes where him and Jen have that final kind of meeting together, and then he just leaves her because he's worried that the painkiller persona will come back and pose a threat to Jen. So you think that's it, Khalil arc is done, it's finished, but he comes back again. And I mentioned in my season finale review, one of the things that hurt that episode was that we get this prolonged sword fight with Khalil and Painkiller again suppressing his persona, and that took away the edge of other kind of events that I think warranted more attention. And that was really more fault of the season finale rather than the season overall. I pointed out in my review there were multiple issues of when certain events were focused more than others. We look at maybe Henderson's death and the threat of the Markovians that needed a bit more oomph to them, and there were certain events that didn't need to be in there as such. Okay, so that was really more flaw of the finale, which was still a great episode, don't get me wrong, but that was more a flaw of that episode rather than the episode overall, the season overall. So that was it really. There wasn't really too much more I could pick at fault. Like I said, this was the best season overall throughout. So if I was going to give an overall score for Black Lightning season 3, I would give it an 8.4 out of 10. I just think it was just really strong. It really expanded its characters, expanded its storytelling. Again, there was so many intelligent themes where we talk about a whole city, if you like, being taken under occupation, other threats coming in, how these events are kind of covered up. You know, from the outside world, there's reference especially to these events in Freeland. Oh, it's just the normal kind of disagreements that goes on. And they did that very well because they want to kind of excuse the fact why other characters from the CW weren't getting involved in that, right? So again, that's a challenge they face maybe going on in season 4, where I think what you want to do is keep the threat on a smaller scale and keep it within Freeland. Don't all of a sudden bring in these kind of world destroying threats to Black Lightning. That's something that's not in keeping in tone with Black Lightning. And B, once you open up that can of worms, you then get the eternal questions, well, why isn't Flash helping them or Supergirl helping them, you know, etc. So I think season 4, if they can keep it, again, just small scale and Freeland, and there are lots of possibilities here because now we've got Gravedigger still around, you've got Tobias wanting to kind of regain his ground on there. Maybe Ordell might break out of prison and have influence on there. Commander Williams may come back, you know. So you've still got as well that teleporting guy, I can't remember his name. In season 2, the guy who was teleporting out smoke, I don't know what happened to him. They haven't explained that a lot. So he could come back into the fold as well. So season 4, you could have all these array of antagonists. Lala as well. Lady Eve may come back. So season 4 could have this dynamic where all these enemies are kind of battling for Freeland. You kind of have that dynamic that you had with Gotham when really it was kind of the villains trying to beat one another and take over Freeland, and how are Jeff and the family going to handle that. I mentioned before where you've really got this Team Lightning dynamic now, where you've got obviously Jeff, Anissa, Jen, you've now got TC, you've now got Brandon, you've now got Sergeant Grell who's come over, you've now got Gamby as well on there, and you've got the Chinese girl, I can't remember with the powers that Lynn was helping her out with. You've got Grace if she comes back as well. You can introduce other people, other metas coming in, so we've really got an expansive take now on Team Lightning if they want to do that. So there's lots of possibilities going forward for season 4. I just hope they can maintain the momentum going on season 4, and hopefully if we get a season 5 throughout on there, just like Supergirl did. You know, Supergirl season 3 was a high watermark for the series, so has Black Lightning. So can Black Lightning keep that consistent level going forward for season 4 and throughout? So yeah, those are my overall thoughts on Black Lightning season 3. You know, like I said, really great. Not only has it been the best season for this show, but it's also been the best series this year for the CW. I think it's just had a better grip on its storylines than the other CW shows on it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you enjoy this third year of Black Lightning? Did you think it was better than previous years? Do you want to see a return more to the kind of racial and social issues and focus on those elements? Or are you happy that we've come a lot more into much more of a superhero-esque type of show? Do you want to see people expanding their abilities going forward in the season 4? Are you happy for it to just keep its distance from the other shows, or do you want to see maybe 1 or 2 characters crossing over? You know, maybe Alex from the DEO can cross over, or maybe we could see Cisco or others pop into Freeland for a bit, or vice versa. That would be very interesting on today. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll provide more reviews and standard episodes if we get any of the other CW shows. Not long to go now. I think there's only 3 or 4 episodes. As far as I know, the finale, sort of both The Flash, Supergirl and Legends are still due to take place. I've done previous episodes where the likes of Walking Dead, the finales have been pushed back following the ongoing events. I haven't heard anything different. I do know, I'll probably just in a separate episode, that productions for the following seasons have obviously been halted, as with all other television shows so far. But the current seasons, I think, are still going ahead, as far as I know. So I'll provide reviews of those later on. But no, Black Lightning, great season. You know, great overall. So let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe and help the channel grow, as you know I give this content to you. So for now, stay safe, keep yourself at safe distances, wash your hands. Hopefully we can get over this virus very soon. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.